Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. How many of you, I'm curious, of the group that is able to make a session at 9 in the morning, how many of you were at the pool party last night? Nicely done. Good job. Okay. The name of this session is Real-World Security. Thank you for coming. I know we're up against some really excellent sessions, so it's always tough to be up against an under-the-hood session. But thank you for coming. My name is Heady. I'm with Soliant Consulting. I'm a senior technical, my name's too long now, senior technical solution architect. And I also help lead the FileMaker practice at Soliant along with Wim. So I've been doing this for a very long time now. This is my 18th DevCon, and I'm certified back through 8. Well, I missed 9. I think a lot of people missed 9. Somehow I did that, but back through 8. I'm also co-author of the book, FileMaker 12 Developer Reference. It's getting a little dated now, but there's still some good information in there. And I've spoken before. So let's just get right into the session. I've got quite a bit to cover, I think. So, real-world security. So my idea for this session was security can be just really tedious. You're handed all these individual little things, and you might say, well, how would I use that? I don't really understand how I put all this together. So when I proposed this session, I thought, what if we started with, I have a project, here are its requirements, how should I secure it? So I picked 4 projects that I thought had scopes that all of us are facing often nowadays, and then attack how we can use FileMaker to secure it. Now they kind of build on each other. Some of the things that we do in the first 1 or 2, we're also going to do in number 4, and I'm not going to re-show that part. I'm going to show the next layer of it. Does that make some sense? Are you with me so far? So let's get into the first session, the first application. Oh, and by the way, there's 4 apps. I made them, they're demonstration apps. So don't think you're going to get a full grade book or anything like that. But they will be available up on the community site for download. Okay? I haven't posted them yet, but they'll be up there. So gradebook. Gradebook, the idea of this one is we have a school. We want parents to get access. You know, parents have access to everything now, right? So on the line. We want parents to have access to their kids' grades. So it's really that simple. We want them to be able to go online and get access to their kids' grades. The grades themselves are not even posted by the teachers into this app. It's an isolated app that will be only accessed by the parents. So the system is going to post from where the teachers do entry into this. So that way we keep our, we have our scope less. We have our vulnerability less as to who has access into this. It's going to have less data in it. So user stories. I'm going to express the requirements as user stories. And user stories are really just a simple who can do what and often where. Who can do what where. So we've got just a few basic lines of our user stories. So the parent, guardian, they can monitor their own child's grades. And there's an implicit requirement here that maybe I should have listed. I probably would have listed if it were true, writing up specs. They can't see other people's grades. They can only see their kids' grades. The parent can change their password. We want them to worry about managing their password. But we want an admin to be able to authorize their access. So what FileMaker security features should we use specifically for this system? Oops, I jumped ahead a slide. The risks. The next thing we want to talk about is what are our risks? Anytime you're making a system, you need to think about what are its risks. Well, if we're going to open it up through the internet, we have the risk of unauthorized access. We always have the risk of unauthorized access because it could be somebody else in the office that is accessing a system. But it gets broader when you put it out on the internet, right? We could have somebody hack it. I don't know why they would want to know a third grader's grades, but you just never know, right? It could be the third grader who's the unauthorized access trying to change the grade. That would make some sense. And there's also the risk that we already talked about that parents might see other children's grades. And then that would cause a huge uproar. So the way we're going to solve it is we're going to have individual accounts, but we want to make it easy to manage. We want to be able to deploy a new version of our system and not have embedded FileMaker passwords that now are out of sync with our development copy. How many of you have had that problem, right? You have embedded FileMaker passwords in the file, and you work on a development version, and when you go to deploy it, now your passwords are out of sync because they changed their password. And frankly, we want better passwords anyhow than what we can easily manage in FileMaker, the requirements of a password. So what we'll do is we'll attack this with the new features that will allow them to authenticate using their own Amazon or Google account. And I've heard a few developers go, well, what good is that? I still have to add an account. Yes, but I don't have to add the password. I just have to add an account. That's a big deal, right? So I think personally that Amazon and Google are a great option when you have people outside your organization that are going to get into your system. Does that make some sense? If you're inside the organization, now I can control a little bit better, and we have an app that will follow that scenario. But for this one, these are parents, these are people outside. Asking them to have an Amazon account or a Google account isn't very high level of entry, right? That isn't a very high bar. To just say, tell me the name of your Google account or tell me the name of your Amazon account. I'll create a record. I'll create an account for that. So I know this is an intermediate class, but I just want to touch this real quick to make sure. Sometimes basic people come in too. So there's basically two things you have to keep in mind when you're doing FileMaker security: the concept of an account and the concept of a privilege set. An account is the who can access, and the privilege set is the what they can do. So the way you set it up is you make a privilege set, and you define all the different things, what layouts they can see, what records they can go to. That's a privilege set. And usually a privilege set is for a group of people that do the same thing in this application. In this case, it's guardians. They're all going to do the same thing. And then you make an account for each person, and you assign them that privilege set. So each account can have one privilege set that it's associated with. Does that make sense? One account? Each person has an account, and it's associated with one privilege set. OK. So let's, there we go. I'm going to go back a second here. OK, so I wanted to be able to talk with you and keep on pace and not goof up my moving cards, so I recorded my demos here. So I'm going to go to WebDirect, and I'm going to open the session. So I just want to show you what's going on. I'm opening Gradebook in WebDirect. So first I'll show it to you, then I'll show you under the hood. So notice that I can put in a name and a password, but I also now have the possibility of doing Amazon or Google. I've opened that up on the server. So all I have to do is click the Amazon button as the user, and it's going to open a web browser for Amazon. I put in my credentials. If I've already memorized it, then they're there, and I log in. And then Amazon will send back a URL that calls my app and opens it and tells it who I am. OK, it passes back my username, and then I matched it. So what happened is I got back the username. I'm open just like normal in FileMaker, and my open script saw what their account name was and found the Guardian record that had that account name. So this is just a very simple interface here. It has the student information there, and I can click on a student and see their grades. So no, it's not a terribly pretty app. It's intended to be a demo, just to demonstrate what's going on. But notice when I tried to make a change to a grade, I couldn't do that. I'm blocked from doing it. So let's look under the hood a little bit. So I'm going into FileMaker. I've already got it open as a full access privilege. Notice there's a relogin button, so you can quickly get to relogging in a different set. And I'm going to File, Manage, Security. And of course, I have to authenticate. So for all of these demos, the full access password is dev. Dev for the password, dev for the name. Actually, for most of these, the password is the same as the name, just to keep it simple. OK. When you open up security, you'll find that there are two interfaces. There is a basic one and then a detail one. This is the basic one. So the basic one has accounts down the left, and when you click on an account, when you click on one of the accounts, you see its information here on the right. This is a later interface. It's a newer one, and some people thought, why did they add this? Well, FileMaker added it because they wanted it to be simple for that person sitting in the office to add more accounts. And you, as the developer, can use the more advanced one to create privilege sets. So in this interface, yeah, here's the more advanced one. So in the basic one, I am able to edit a privilege set, but I'm not able to actually create a new privilege set even. So that way you can set up privilege sets working with the team to see what is it that the people can do. But you can keep them from having to create new ones. All they do is new account, make an account for the Guardian, and assign it to the Guardian's privilege set. Now let's go into into the detail view here. We're in the detail view of security now, and notice that I'm going to the privilege set tab. So the first tab are all the accounts, the second tab are the privilege sets. And that bottom privilege set is Guardian. Let's dig into it. It has a few of the extra features. So the dialog of a privilege set has a lot going on here. Now I want to zoom in a bit. So at the top, you've got the name, and you can give it a description, so you can give it as full a view as you, so you better understand who that's intended for. And then in the upper left there, we've got data access and design. So this is where you do records and layouts and kind of the overview of it. And you can set it by default so that they can just see all the layouts, right? That's the default out of the bag, that they see all the layouts, they can edit all the records. But you also have custom privileges, and that's what we've made use of here. Why the custom privilege? Because we don't want Guardians to see other students' records, other Guardians' records, other students' records. Down in the lower left are extended privileges. This is part of the privilege set. This is part of usually the where kind of stuff is controlled down here. They can access this database through WebDirect or by using FileMaker. So notice those two I've called out specifically. Access via FileMaker Network. The FileMaker Network is FileMaker Pro and Go. They're one and the same in terms of privileges. So now let's look at the records custom privileges for this app. When you go into custom privileges, now you can get granular. You can define it specific for the table. And even off to the right, you can choose field-specific access. But for this case, we only need the view. If you select multiple rows at once, you can actually assign all at the same time. So you don't have to click each one individually. You can shift-select all the rows that apply and then do it at once. Let's look at the limited view. So I can choose yes or no for view. In this case, it's limited. Sometimes you can see a record, sometimes you can't. Make that a little bit smaller so when we're zoomed in, we can see it. So how we're going to limit that? We're going to do get account name. We'll find out the account name, and we'll compare that to the account name on the Guardian record. And that's how we'll determine whether or not you can view that record. Does that make sense? Okay. Pretty simple, right? Just get the account name. If that account name is on the record, you can see it. We're going to do the same thing for the student table and the grade table. It's just that they're looking through the relationship to the Guardian. So from student, the related Guardian. Okay? They don't have the ability to edit anything. So anything you marked as no is just going to have a little dash in it. I frankly like that they do that. I get a really quick overview than having to kind of read the yeses and the nos. The dashes really stand out over it. Okay, so when you close out, you have to authenticate again that you still know the full access password, even though I didn't make any change to it. FileMaker just wants to make sure. There's one more part of this that I wanted to call out to you. The account name, I found that when the account names are an email address, now I have the @ sign in it. So I need to change the indexing of that field so that I can perform a find on a name that includes the @ sign. So you might not know about this. I've picked the account name field, go to the storage tab, and down here at the bottom, usually this would just be English or whatever language, go all the way to the bottom of the list and pick Unicode. And that way, all those extra characters are also in the index. Otherwise, it doesn't find a match. Okay? So we're already done, so we'll discard that change. Okay. So we were able to limit view access. I want to say one thing about limiting view access. Only do it when you really have to. And then pay attention to what view you take them to. Don't take them to a list view, say show all, and have view limitation on it. Because FileMaker has to do this. Can they see this one? Yeah. Can they see this one? Yeah. Can they see this one? Yeah. Through your entire stack of 10,000 records you just took them to. So performance will not be so great. So you can make that a little bit easier by first performing a find. So your script can do a find and ratchet it down to only what they could see anyhow. So be careful of your scripts and play with it a little bit and check your performance when you use view restriction. Edit restriction, which we'll have another example that does that in a moment, is a lot less costly because FileMaker only has to decide if you can edit the record at the point you're trying to edit it. It doesn't have to figure out for the whole stack if you can edit all of these. Do you see the difference? Does that make sense? Okay. So Timeslips. Timeslips, the idea is that we have workers, they're going to be on a hosted FileMaker server, and they need to be able to enter time. How many of you have to enter time? Yeah, so we have some business rules in place though, right? We want you to be able to tell us when you're done with your time record, when it's submitted, and then once it is submitted, the next group, the clerical group, will put it on an invoice. And of course, once you've told us, I've submitted this, we don't want you to make changes to it unless you unsubmit it. Does that make sense? You have to unsubmit it. And to unsubmit it, it has to have not already been invoiced. Once it's on an invoice, sorry, you can't make a change. So here are user stories that express what I said here. So an employee can enter their time and they can submit it. They can unsubmit something, and they can view but not modify other employees. So we're not worried about view. They can see the time other people work, that's fine, but we don't want them to edit other people's time. And finally, there's one extra requirement here that is part of this system. We're tracking some social security number, and only our comptroller should be able to edit that. Edit or even view it. We want to really secure that because, social security number is a problem. So what are our risks? That things can get modified once it's invoiced. That causes havoc, right? If you're trying to modify your time, now I'm thinking this is your productivity, but I didn't invoice. I've already invoiced some other number. Maybe I didn't make the invoice big enough. Maybe I made the invoice too big. So that's a problem. Unauthorized access to employee social security number. That would definitely be a problem. So FileMaker Security versus FileMaker Interface. You can provide nice things to help the user with, excuse me. That was a loud cough. You can provide nice things in your interface. For example, I said find the set of records that they're allowed to see. That's not security. That's helping them. That's guiding them. You can use script triggers to make certain things happen, but layout level, that's not security, okay? Because you have to apply it on every layout that has that table. Security means going into the actual, file managed security and doing actual security things on the data. Secure the data so that people don't have sideways around it, working around your interface, okay? So FileMaker has added, with 16, we have a new feature. It's FileMaker Field Encryption. It lets you encrypt just one field of data instead of having to encrypt the whole thing at rest. Now, frankly, I'm a proponent of the encrypting it at rest. But if for whatever reason you don't want to do that, you just want to secure one field, this is a way you can do it. So I'm showing you how you can use that feature. The tricky part is, where are you going to put that encryption key that it can't be hacked out of your system too easily? And the best way I've come up with is to put it in a custom function. Okay, so I'll show you how we're going to do that. And the advantages is that the data is stored encrypted, so you just simply can't get to it. It's stored that way. So if somebody even were to get the whole file, it's encrypted, okay? And it gives you it can be a second layer of encryption on top of encryption at rest. You can use them together. We'll be using encryption at rest in another solution in a minute. Encryption at rest means when the whole file is not being hosted, it's encrypted. When it's not open, it's encrypted, whether it's open hosted or open locally. It's stored encrypted. Okay, so let's look at Timeslips. So we're in a little list view. I've logged in. I'm showing you here, there's a re-login button so you can change which account you're logged in as so you don't have to deal with it too much. And you can see that I have two records right here. The bottom one is not submitted, it's not invoiced, and I can make changes to it. The top one, I can't make changes to because it's submitted. So now I'm going to submit that record. So now I've done some niceties in my interface that it kind of expresses to the person. It's gray now even though I'm on the record using custom formatting so that they know this one's locked. If I try to edit it, which I did a moment ago there, I can't. The only thing I can edit is that submit field. So we've got a very granular edit, right? I'm allowed to edit the submit field so I can unsubmit it if it's not invoiced, but I can't edit anything else. Do you see the distinction there? Okay. Okay. So how can you do that? Oh, and here's the last one. I'm not allowed to unsubmit this one because it's been invoiced. Right?
What is submit doing then? Anything or just turning off?
Submit is just a chain of custody thing. That's for me, the person who's doing work, telling the people who are going to produce invoices, it's okay to put this record on an invoice now. I'm not adding any more notes, it's complete and it's accurate. So that the second I put one in, they can't just grab it if they're doing invoice that day and it goes off, and I needed to adjust something. Okay? Does that make sense? So it allows you to have these chain of custody. At this point, I'm authorizing that they can put it on an invoice and go with it at any point they want. But there's that in-between land between I submitted it and they haven't yet invoiced it, that I could double back and uncheck it and make a change and then check it again. Okay? As soon as the question is I have to be careful of that in-between land where the invoicing person is starting to work on it, but it isn't yet. So as soon as the workflow, which isn't demonstrated in this app, is that as soon as they attach it to an invoice, it gets marked. So it either isn't or isn't part of an invoice. Okay, actually clicking it is what checks that and then makes it part of the invoice. Okay, all right. So let's look under the hood. Oh, did I cut it off too soon? I did. Rats. Okay, so I can catch up, can't I? Nope, I can't. Okay, so I'm showing you the next part here. First, this is making use of the new field level encryption. So what happens is, so I'm going to the employees to look at it. I'm logged in as myself, and I'm not allowed to see anything. You'll see that there's two fields here. There's the Social Security number you see, and then down in the right corner here, that's the part you wouldn't usually put on the layout. I've put it there for the demonstration so you can see how it's stored encrypted. The field that's in the upper right is just a global field. So it's not displaying the real data until I choose to unencrypt it and display it in that global. And then I can take the data they put, that the controller enters, and I can move it back to the actual storage. So now I'm going to relog in as the controller. And I'll go to employees again. And now you'll see I see a little different experience. I see little dots. That's because I put them there. It's just a global field. I just put some representation of it being bulleted out. Okay? And when the controller clicks in the Social Security number field, I decrypt how it's stored, and I put it in there for plain view for them to see. Okay? Make a change, and as soon as I click out, now it's going to get put into it's going to get stored again. Okay? So let's look under the hood. So the first thing is, like I said, it's a global field. It's just a global field. And it has two triggers. It has an on-object enter and an on-object exit. They both call the same script, but they pass a different parameter. I either tell it I want it to decode or encode. Okay? Decrypt or encrypt. So now let's look at the script. So that's my trigger script, SSN. Okay. So I'm just doing some validating at the top, and I load my parameters. There's the current way that we're loading parameters at Soliant there. And then now I get to here. So here's the real meat of it. So first thing I do is I try to see, are you even allowed to edit this record? Because what's the point? If you can't edit, if you aren't supposed to be editing, I'm going to get out, right? So that's the first thing I'm checking. And now I'm going to set the key. So I'm storing in a global variable the key. In a local variable, I'm loading it into a key. I'm not storing it there. I'm loading it there just for use. And it's stored in this custom function that's named _ crypt SSN key. Okay? Well, remember, users don't have, I've blocked their access to that. So users can't just get to that easily. If you're going to do it in the data viewer, you would have to be able to, authenticate at the data viewer. So how would they get to it? How will they call a custom function? It's only inside that file. Okay? And part of it is just a level of obfuscation. So I've obscured it. You've made it 3 steps away. It's harder to connect the dots and go find it. Okay. So let's keep going here. The custom function, which I'll show you in just a moment, it can return an error. So if it does, that's the error. I'll show you in a minute how we know. There's also an extended custom privilege involved that the custom function's looking at. Okay, so it'll connect the dot for you in just a minute. So if what they wanted was to decrypt, then you just run this little function, the new function, crypt decrypt base 64, and pass it the value, and it decrypts it. Very simple function. It encrypts or decrypts. You pass it what you want to decrypt or encrypt and what the key is. In this case, we're going to decrypt it, and here's the key. If what this script was doing was encrypting, we're doing the opposite. We're taking what's in the global variable, and we're loading it into the field. Do you see that? So there's another level in the custom function. We're going to go there now. Looks like I hadn't zoomed out all the way. So this whole top part with all those asterisks, that's just commenting. That's our standard commenting for a custom function. The meat is down here in this let statement. We're going to get the user's current extended privileges. And I've created a new privilege that's called Access SSN. I'll show you that in just a moment. So you didn't know that, did you? Or maybe you did, that you can create your own custom privileges. But that's a very powerful feature. So I'll show it to you in just a second. I'm checking if you have that extended custom privilege. So that's how. Only a person who's authorized to get this function, otherwise it's going to return that error. Okay? So that means it's a person running this function has to have that extended custom privilege. Otherwise, they're going to get back the error. And the key was very big. So now let's go look at the extended privileges. So you've got those standard ones that come with FileMaker for accessing, but you have the button at the bottom where you can pick new. So let's look at this one that I've created. It's actually very simple. It's just a key and a description, and then you check who has it, which privilege set it belongs to. So that means you can quite easily, if they were, let's say we've got controller and then we have controller's assistant, and most of the time the controller's assistant can't see it unless she's on vacation. It would be very easy for the controller to come in here and just turn it on for a week for that other privilege set. That's all they'd have to do. Check a box. Okay, now you can do it for a week. When I get back, I'll uncheck it. Does that make sense? So you have the extended custom privilege, which allows you to see the Social Security number, and the custom function that contains the key, make sure you have that privilege before it'll give you the key. Okay? Okay. Okay. I'm going to keep moving. So, jobs mobile. This is becoming more and more a use case that happens. You need to take a file out in the field, in some kind of service industry. You have your job. So when you're in the office, you're going to download your work for the day. You're going to go out in the field where you might or might not have internet connection. So you want to be able to work locally. You record your jobs, and when you're done and you get back with an internet connection, you post them back. So having a mobile file local out on a device creates all kinds of security risks, right? Let's look a little bit more closely. So there's quite a few user stories here. The technician can download their work, right? They can create work orders, a log of their work, so they can record what they did when they were out there. They can capture signatures. and then they can push it back up. So I want to focus in this story about how you can secure that local file. Because probably in most businesses, you might be using features we'll talk about in a minute, your hosted version that has all your data for managing your jobs, scheduling your jobs. That's probably using Active Directory or Open Directory or one of the other external authentications. But you can't use external authentication in a local file. So now you've got to figure out what kind of security do you want in that local file for that person. So the device could be lost. That's a big risk. What happens if they lose the device? It contains, perhaps that solution, that data is proprietary. It's important who that client list is. Or maybe that app even includes some important algorithms that are proprietary to your business for how you calculate something. So if your competitor got hold of that, that would be a risk. And if the person has the file that isn't encrypted and it has admin privileges, they could use third-party tools to replace the full access password with a different full access password and then get to your system. So when you let a file out of your hands and take it out of your secure environment, that's a risk. Does that make sense? Okay. We also have the possibility that we could just shoot ourselves in the foot and we could lose unposted work. So we need to watch for that more carefully. So securing a local file. There's a couple things you could do. If it's not that important, if it's not that complicated of a system, if it doesn't have all those other things I just said, if you're not that worried about it, you could take it down and let it auto-open, understanding the fact that the person has already authenticated against their iPad. They've already put their fingerprint, so you could use the security of the device itself, right? And not worry about the time you would find out in the local file who the person is when you've loaded the file and they click the button to pull down their day's work. It's going to connect to the file on the server, and that file will require them to log in before it gives them the day's work. So now I know who their account is, and I could put it in the downloaded file. Does that make sense? So I could find out then. So they download an empty one, they hit the button, it says, tell me who you are, they log in to the server, and it says, that's fine, Bob, here's your 10 jobs for the day, and it brings them down. Okay? And at that time, I know it's Bob, so I could record that. But what if this is important data? What if this is, I'm worried about my competitors trying to take it. I'm worried that my sales guy is going to take the iPad to my competitor as he leaves, right? I mean, that's a possibility, that they could walk with the data. People are sued all the time for walking with proprietary information and going to the competitor with it. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the first thing we're going to do is have a mobile-specific file. If you're taking something out locally, the best thing you can do is not take your entire business with you on your iPad when you just wanted to do one or two things. And there is a great session. I don't have it on my list here of other referral sessions, but there's a session about doing one thing on mobile. So if it's already happened, go check the video, and if it hasn't, maybe look it up if you're thinking about doing mobile things. But about the importance of focus on what you're doing and do that well. And that way you have less risk. You haven't taken down all the client data, only exactly what they need to do that job. And then we're going to require a full access privilege to create links into this file. There used to be a technique I called the authenticated hacker. And that's where a person who has a valid password to just see a certain amount of data could create their own file and create a relationship to it and work completely around your interface. Often it's a person who is smart and savvy in your business and thinks your business rules are getting in their way of them getting their work done. They know better, and they're just going to circumvent it. Okay? But now you can set a button that says you have to have full access period before you can create a relationship to the data in that file. It's a no-brainer, do it, right? Turn that on. Don't think about would somebody do this, just turn it on, okay? We're going to do another thing. We're going to take a dramatic step. We're going to totally rip out the full access password out of this local file before we let it go down. It could never be, the schema can never be changed again in that version of it. But if it fell into the enemy's hands, they also can't replace the full access passwords and hack into it because it doesn't have any full access passwords. They're gone, okay? And we're going to rely on the device's authentication, but we're going to do one more thing. We're going to make use of encryption at rest. We're going to make it so when the file's not open, it's encrypted. And to open it, you would have to give it an encryption pass. You would have to give it the password. So that can be our local security. It's a shared password. Anybody that has that file on their iPad would use the same password. You could do that when you have it in FileMaker Go. But that's kind of cumbersome too, right? So we can do one more thing. Instead of taking that file and opening it in FileMaker Go and requiring the user to unencrypt, to give us that password, we can ball it up use the iOS SDK kit. And part of the iOS SDK kit is you can tell it, I'll show you, you can tell it what your encryption key is as part of and then it compiles it. So that way, when they open that app, the app is managing the key. The person never knows the key. It just auto-opens an encrypted at rest file. Okay. So let's look at Jobs Mobile. I know we're getting a little bit deep here. I hope that I'm not outrunning you, that we're okay. Trying to take it slow enough here. So here's our little mobile file. It's a simple little file. It's got a dashboard. I can see my next job, and I can drill into it, and I can see that I've got 3 other jobs to do while I'm out, and I can check off the tasks I'm supposed to do. Now you'll notice it has buttons in the corner that say download and upload, and that's all it has. It has pretty buttons. There is no download and upload, okay? This isn't a session on sync. I'm just trying to explain how the work would flow. So here's the first part. We want to make sure that this file is only open with the latest version. So we're going to restrict it to require FileMaker 16. You have to do this when the file's still local, by the way, if you're going to host it. This one isn't hosted, but if you were to host it, you have to set this first. So set it before you host it. Keep in mind what version of features you're using. If you start to use FileMaker 15 features, then make it require at least 15. If you're using 16 features, use 16. Okay? So remember that in the last one, the Timeslip one, it would be important to set that one to 16 because we're using features that just came out at 16 to secure the Social Security number. So this is an important security feature. We don't want them to hack around something, all right? Okay. Yes? Well, it's already stored. I don't think it would be that bad. He asked, what happens if somebody with 15 opens the one that is using the field level encryption? Well, the way we did it, we're storing it encrypted. So that's just text with encrypted text in it, and that doesn't change.
So that's all they see?
That's all they see, and the buttons aren't going to work because they don't have the functions to encrypt and decrypt. Okay. So in that particular case, it's not that bad. But the interfaces can look really weird when you've got a button bar and you don't have a button bar, so, okay. So I'm also setting it to auto-open with the mobile user. It's just a generic password. Mobile user's the name, and it's a big password. So the file's going to auto-open. And if it's one it's going to auto-open with, might as well make it an obnoxious password, right? Okay. So now, we're going to go to, oh, good, you see the menu bar, okay. So we're going to go, I think you saw, we went into the tools, the developer tools, so you have to have FileMaker Pro Advanced to have this menu. to have the tools menu. Okay? And if you do, then you can pick the tools. So what we're doing here is I've opened up the developer utilities, and this is where I can do two things. I can enable encryption at rest, and I can remove the full access password. So you're going to notice I'm about to rip out the full access password. What do you think I might need before I do that? A copy, yes. Back it up first, right? Okay. So I would want to back up to make sure I didn't shoot myself in the foot, but you'll also see that you can pick that you're not overwriting the original file. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm choosing what files, and jobs has 2 files. Huh? What did you say? We have 2 files, jobs deployer and jobs mobile. Because we're going to put it in the iOS kit and we don't want to overwrite our data, actually this would work even if it's FileMaker Go. What we're going to do is give the person the deployer, and inside the deployer in a container field will be the mobile file. So that way we can overwrite the deployer, that's no problem, because it doesn't really have any data other than it contains the mobile file. But then we can say, have you posted everything? Is it okay to replace? We have a new version of the mobile. Is it okay to overwrite your old version? So they don't lose their data. We don't want them to lose their unsubmitted work. Okay? Let's keep going here. So both of those files, I want to have the same encryption key, and I'm going to remove the full access password from both. So now I'm telling it, where do I want to save the new file that doesn't have the encryption? So I've got one folder that's named master and one that's named encrypted, right? So I'm putting it in the encrypted folder. Now I clicked on the options, and I'm just going to choose those 2 options. The option to remove the admin access, and then the option for encryption at rest. Now encryption at rest, oops, oh, I don't need it anyhow. Okay, so when we do encryption, we have to tell it what our shared ID is going to be. Now I made that simple here. I would make it complicated in a real solution. This is a demo file. And then the encryption password, that's the thing the user is going to have to enter if you just open this and go. They're going to have to enter that encryption. So you decide how tough you want to make that password. And I would also think about it being with mobile devices. Are you going to, what keyboard are they going to have up? Are you going to make them be like going lowercase, then the capitals, then up, you know. So maybe a long number is better. Maybe something that's just a couple numbers and a couple letters is better. Okay? But, and I'm going to keep it simple here, but if you're going to roll it into the iOS SDK kit, now they'll never know what that password is. So you can, again, make it obnoxious, right? You can make it a big key. So let's keep going. I kept it simple here. So it's just tech. I just made it tech. They could type the word tech. You can also give them a hint there if you want. It won't let you just put the password in the hint, though. It won't let you do that to yourself. Okay, so then once you've got those options set, you just create, and it pretty quickly creates the file, especially since we're dealing with pretty much empty files here anyhow, right? So it created the file. So now you can see in my encryption folder, I've got a copy, and it creates a little log for me about what it did too. Okay, so now I have 2 files, jobs deployer, jobs mobile. In my encrypted file, they no longer have the admin access, and they are encrypted at rest. When I try to open it, it's asking for the password, even though it has auto open, remember? It had auto open in the file options, but I had to put in tech, the encryption password, okay? So now I'm doing one more thing. Remember I said that I'm going to distribute mobile inside of the deployer. So all deployer has is a little layout with a container field, and I'm going to drag mobile into it and put my version. So my scripting in deployer will know if it's got a new version. Okay, so then the last moving piece of this, and this is not a full session on how you can do an iOS SDK app, but there are great sessions for how to make those, and it's not hard. You can do this. Okay, you have to get Xcode, and you have to download the package, and then it makes this folder that I'm about to show you. So I've already made my app, but what I'm going to do is replace the version of jobs deployer that I originally put in the app with a new version. So this is kind of simulating I have an update. Okay? Okay. So let's go to the next one. So now I'm just tidying things up a little bit. So I can open up this folder down at the bottom called Jobs App. So I'm going to copy that file, just so that I don't have to do the drag and drop thing to get in the right spot. I copied it, and I'm opening up Jobs App. So this is my folder that the iOS SDK made for me. That is my whole package that is the app that would get compiled into the app. Okay? And I'm replacing the old version of Jobs Deployer. So think of it, it's almost like a package, right? You can just open folders and find where the FileMaker file lives and just replace it once you have it set up. And then I have to do one more thing. There's a config file. And way at the bottom of it, I thought I was able to do this. I know it's hard for you to read there. The very last line, I just had to put my key, the password that they would have had to enter. Mine was short, it's tech, but it could be obnoxious now that they'll never have to see it. Okay. So then I open up the Jobs app, which is the Xcode project, and I'm going to tell it recompile it into an app. So I'm just going to hit the little button at the top, the little play button, and it's going to recompile it. And I have it set, do you see right next to it, it says iPad Pro? So it's going to compile it for the iPad Pro as I get to preview it in the simulator. So we're going to do that here. Go ahead. Let's see. 5 minutes, okay. Running out of time. Okay. Okay, so it's booting up the simulator. Takes a moment. Come on, boot, boot, boot. There we go. Now, if I had made a pretty app, you know, I didn't do any work of making a splash screen and a pretty logo and stuff. But this is now into my deployer. And I'm saying, do you want to deploy or not? And if you say yes, then it exported. So the way the iOS SDK works is, you give it a file. I gave it the deployer. It first takes a copy of deployer and copies it into the sandbox documents folder for that app. And then when it opened, FileMaker deployer, then it's run, now from then on it's me. It's running my script, and I'm asking them, hey, I've got a new version. Do you want me to overwrite your data? Do you have anything that's unsupported? And if they say yes, I deploy it. And I'm doing one more thing. I export the contents of a text field that has the version number. So I make just a little text file also in the documents folder that tells me what was the last version I installed. So that way I can know what version's there without having to install it, without having to link to the open file. Because the one problem is once I open that mobile file with a relationship, I cannot close it without closing mine. If I close it, it'll say, oh, you might need this. I'll make that the little hidden in square brackets way. And then I can't overwrite the mobile file. So when you export the contents of a container field, it overwrites the file if it isn't open. It doesn't add a -1 or something at the end of its name. So that's how I deployed the mobile file. Okay? And I'm thinking that even with that little text file way, if I had gone further and I'd written out my upload and my download, I could write out to the text file where I'm at in that process. When did I last upload? When did I last download? And my deployer could be smart enough to check that and know if, hey, you brought down stuff, but you never pushed it back up. So I could be even smarter about it, right? Okay. I'm out of time. Okay, the last one I wanted to show you, it really follows most of the same use cases. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Yeah, and we're out of time too, so I've got to hurry. Say what? Well, I would just write a script and it would have a relationship to the one hosted, to the hosted file. So it's just a syncing situation. I wouldn't use any of the sync tools though. I would just write my file up. I would write a script that loops and builds up the records and sends them up. So I would open up the hosted file. So the ones that are in the iOS SDK kit can have relationships to the ones that are hosted. Okay, so the last one, in a way, it's the last one, but in a way it combines everything. So here's the big deal. It's PT Pro is for physical therapy. It has a lot of the same requirements. I'm a physical therapist. I've got my laptop. I always have connection because I'm in I'm in the real world. I'm not remote out by a pond or something. So I can just access the file that's hosted, and I can make changes to my records. So it's using the same things we've already done. I can only see my account records. But what's the big difference? The big difference is we've crossed into medical record land, and that means that we have to secure it. We have more legal regulations about how we secure it. So all the things we've been doing, we should do with this file too. We should use encryption at rest. Use all the encryption features when you're dealing with medical stuff. Encryption at rest, but not only that, encrypt the container field data. Encrypt communication, and that's what I wanted to show you real quick was on the server here, how you set up the server things for the encryption. It's not how, it's the where. It's the way you do it. There are a couple other sessions here that show you. Wim did a session yesterday that was really great about the encryption. So first, there's a white paper FileMaker has about HIPAA. We can use script triggers and things like that to help create an audit log, but that's not part of this system. But I'm just telling you, that's things you can use. Scheduled backups are required. So you have a lot of requirements. You can even use custom menus to help drive users towards what they're allowed to see. Okay. So this one's again hosted on the server. But what I'm going to do is this time I'm making use of the Microsoft Azure. The reason I would use Microsoft here is now I have my employees. I might have 360 Office. So when you authenticate against this, that means in FileMaker I can just make a group. Instead of having to make an individual password for each person, I can just have a group for the physical therapist group. And they authenticate with their account, like their Exchange account, right? They authenticate, and it just opens it up for them. So it's like external authentication. I could, well, it is external authentication. Just want to get to that place. So there's my schedule. It's the same kind of problem. The difference is I have more legal requirements. Let me see if it'll let me. Okay, there we go. I'm going to jump ahead to here. Okay. Okay, so I just want to show you, this is the tab. Doggone it. So when you open up the FileMaker Server Admin Console, this is the tab where you get to manage which kinds of authentications you're going to accept on that server. Know that when you turn on an authentication type, it isn't file specific. It's for the whole server. So even though you might have a file, only one file that's configured to use Amazon passwords, for example, you need, they're going to see that as a button choice for any file they open on that server. So you need to think about which authentications you're going to offer, and you might even want to have multiple servers if you're going to have one that's doing, yeah?
Do you have to set it up for each file off the server?
Well, for each file, then you have to create either a group, right? So if you're using Azure like this one, you have to make one account, just like you did with Active Directory or Open Directory, one group account, that the account name matches the group. And it's a big key that it matches for Azure. The group name's actually really big. It looks like a UUID key, okay? But here's where you set it up. Wim yesterday did a class on this. And even if you did not see it, there's security tips in here. I'm going to tell you to just look at them yourselves because we're out of time. But session resources. There's 2 more security sessions coming up today. Demystifying SSL is next. A coworker of mine, Mislav Kos with Soliant's doing it. It's about SSL. So that's part of, if you're going to turn on Azure, you've got to use SSL, and you've got to know how to do that. Also, there's a basic one. So if you were like, holy crap, what is all this stuff you're telling me? Maybe go to the basic one at 1 o'clock this afternoon by Mark Richmond, The Skeleton Key is wonderful. And FileMaker Security in the Enterprise, that's another great session. That's later today. And as I said, Wim did this session yesterday. It included a 50-page white paper with screenshots telling you exactly how to set that up. That's why I'm not trying to recreate it in 1 minute in here. So even though you didn't see it, you've got that. Also, if you didn't know, there's a DevCon YouTube channel now and it has every video from last year. And that's all great stuff. There was a great mobile track, and here's some sessions from it. And finally, if you're trying to write an audit log, if you want to write your own, in 2014, Wim did a great presentation on scripting that actually built an audit log. And it's available from our Soliant blog post. You can download that. Help documents are incredibly useful, and I told you about the HIPPA white paper. And yes, the session will have updates, and thank you. Thank you for sticking with me, even though I ran over. Thank you.